I stood in the middle of Miami International Airport, watching my children walk away. Their backs grew smaller with each step, swallowed by the crowd. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry wasps. I clutched my purse tighter, feeling the weight of nothing. No documents, no money, no return ticket. Just a note they'd slipped into my hand before vanishing. "We can't do this anymore, Mom. You're on your own." The air conditioning cut through my cotton dress. I was 60 years old, and I'd never felt more invisible in my life. Then I heard a voice behind me, low and certain. "They're going to regret it." If you're new here, please subscribe to Every Smile Hides a Story. We're just starting, and every day we'll bring you a new story that reminds you there's more to people than what you see on the surface. I didn't turn around at first. My legs had gone numb. The terminal stretched endlessly in both directions, filled with people rushing toward something. Destinations, reunions, beginnings. I had none of those. The voice came again, closer this time. "Ma'am, are you all right?" I wiped my face with the back of my hand and finally looked. A man in his 70s stood there, silver hair combed back, suit wrinkled from travel. His eyes were pale blue, tired in a way that had nothing to do with jet lag. "I'm fine," I said, which was the biggest lie I'd told all year. He didn't move. I saw what happened. I was 3 gates down. My throat tightened. Of course, someone had seen. My humiliation was public record now, witnessed by strangers in an American airport. "They left you," he continued, "and it wasn't a question." I nodded because speaking felt impossible. The shame burned hotter than anger. I'd raised them, sacrificed everything. Years of double shifts, cleaning houses, sending money they never seemed to appreciate, forgiving every forgotten birthday, every cancelled visit. And this was how it ended. The man gestured toward a row of plastic chairs, bolted to the floor. "Sit down before you fall down." I obeyed, more from shock than anything else. He sat beside me, leaving one chair empty between us like a respectful distance. The smell of coffee drifted from somewhere nearby, mixing with cleaning solution and jet fuel. "My name is Richard," he said. "Richard Grant." I told him mine, Maria Dolores Almazan. He repeated it carefully, getting the pronunciation almost right. "How did you end up here, Maria?" And so I told him, not everything at first, just pieces. How my children had called me 3 months ago, their voices bright with promises. "Come visit us, Mum. We want you here. We've been terrible, we know, but we want to make it up to you." I'd believed them. God help me, I'd believed every word. They'd sent me a ticket, one way, which should have been my first warning. They'd picked me up from this very airport 4 days ago, smiling, hugging me like the children I remembered. We'd driven to a small apartment where I'd stayed alone most of the time while they worked, or said they worked. Yesterday they'd told me we were going on a trip. "Pack light," my daughter had said. Instead, they brought me back here, handed me that note and disappeared into the crowd like ghosts. Richard listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "I have a son," he finally said. "Haven't spoken to him in 8 years. He thinks I chose my business over him. Maybe I did." He stared at the departures board flickering above us. "But I never would have done what they did to you. That's cruelty dressed up as convenience." The words settled between us like stones. I felt something crack open in my chest. Not quite hope, but not total despair either. "What am I supposed to do?" I whispered. "I have nothing. No passport, no money. They took everything." Richard turned to face me fully. "You have more than you think. And right now, you have a choice. You can sit here and let them win, or you can let me help you." I searched his face for the catch, the angle, the hidden cost. My whole life had taught me nothing came free. "Why would you help me? You don't know me." He smiled, sad and knowing. "Because I'm dying, Maria, and I'm tired of leaving nothing good behind. If you've made it this far, please subscribe to our channel and leave a like. It's really important. It shows YouTube that this content matters to you, and it helps us reach people who need to hear these stories." The confession hung in the air between us like smoke. Richard didn't elaborate, and I didn't ask. Some truths need space to breathe. He stood up slowly, joints protesting. "Come on! Let's get you somewhere safe first, then we'll figure out the rest." I should have been scared. Every rational part of me screamed warnings. Strange man, foreign country, vulnerable position. But something in his face stopped my fear, a kind of bone-deep weariness that matched my own. We walked through the terminal together, him carrying nothing but a leather briefcase, me with just my purse. He hailed a taxi outside where the Miami heat hit like a physical wall. The driver loaded us in without questions. Richard gave an address I didn't recognize. During the drive, he explained some of it. He'd been in Argentina on business, heading home to Virginia. He was a widower, lung cancer, stage 4, 6 months if he was lucky. "I have money," he said simply. "More than I'll ever spend. No family that cares. A son who made it clear I'm dead to him already, and a lot of regrets." I watched palm trees blur past the window. "I still don't understand why me. Because you're alone, and I'm alone. Because you deserved better, and because—" He paused, choosing words carefully. "My wife was Mexican. Her family disowned her when she married me, said she was betraying her culture, chasing money. It broke her heart. She died 5 years ago, still hoping they'd forgive her. They didn't even come to the funeral." I felt tears prick my eyes. "I'm sorry. Don't be. Just let me do this, whatever this turns out to be." The taxi stopped in front of a hotel. Not fancy, but clean and safe-looking. Richard paid the driver and we went inside. He got me a room, paid for a week up front. In the elevator, he handed me a credit card. "For food, clothes, whatever you need. The PIN is written on the back." I stared at the card like it might bite. "I can't accept this." "You can, and you will. Tomorrow we'll go to the consulate and start getting your documents sorted. But tonight, you rest. You've been through enough." The elevator doors opened. He walked me to my room, waited while I unlocked it. The space was simple: bed, TV, bathroom. It felt like a palace compared to where I'd been an hour ago. "Richard," I said before he could leave, "why are you really doing this?" He leaned against the doorframe, suddenly looking every year of his age. "Because nobody helped me when I needed it most. And I became the kind of man who didn't help others either. I don't have time to fix everything I broke, but maybe I can fix this one thing." The next 3 weeks moved like a fever dream. Richard was true to his word. We went to the Mexican consulate where he hired a lawyer to expedite my documents. He paid for everything, the fees, the rush processing, the translator. He never asked for anything in return. We fell into a strange routine. Breakfast at a diner near the hotel, where he drank black coffee and barely ate. The waitress knew us by the 3rd day, called him honey and me sweetheart, like we were regulars who'd been coming for years instead of days. Then errands, paperwork, phone calls, waiting rooms. He taught me how to navigate Miami, which buses to take, which areas to avoid. He showed me where to find good produce, cheap but clean, in neighborhoods that reminded me of home. We'd walk sometimes, when he had the energy, along streets lined with palm trees that whispered in the ocean breeze. In the evenings we'd sit in the hotel lobby and talk. The chairs were worn vinyl, cracked in places, but comfortable in their honesty. He told me about his wife, Catherine, how she'd loved gardening and terrible crime novels, how she'd memorized plant names in Latin just to impress the ladies at the garden club, how she'd made him laugh even when the cancer was eating her alive, how he'd buried himself in work after she died because grief was easier to ignore than face. "I thought keeping busy would make it hurt less," he said one night, stirring sugar into coffee he wouldn't drink. "Instead, it just made me numb." And then one day I realized I couldn't remember what her laugh sounded like anymore. That's when I knew I'd failed her. I told him about my life in Mexico, the village I'd left at 18, the husband who died young in a construction accident, the children I'd raised alone, how I'd worked myself to exhaustion to give them opportunities I never had, cleaning houses until my hands cracked and bled, sending money I should have spent on myself, missing their childhoods because I was too busy ensuring they had futures. How they'd grown distant once they moved to the United States, their calls growing shorter, their visits non-existent. They were embarrassed by me, I admitted one night, watching the lobby's ceiling fan turn lazy circles. I could feel it. My accent, my clothes, my education. I wasn't the mother they wanted to show their American friends. Richard's jaw tightened. Did they ever say that? They didn't have to. It was in how Carla would correct my English in front of people. How Miguel stopped inviting me to his work events. How they'd both tense up when I spoke Spanish in public. I picked at a loose thread on the chair arm. I tried so hard to be what they needed. I took English classes at night after work. I watched American TV to learn how people talked, but it was never enough. I was never enough. Richard's hand tightened around his coffee cup until his knuckles went white. Their shame says everything about them and nothing about you. But it didn't feel that way. It felt like failure, mine, not theirs. You know what the worst part was? I continued, needing to say it out loud. I started to believe them, started to think maybe I was the problem, that I should have stayed in Mexico, that coming here was asking too much. Maria, I made myself smaller and smaller trying to fit into their American lives, and it still wasn't enough. So they decided to throw me away completely. The silence that followed felt heavy. Richard stared at his reflection in the black coffee. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. My son told me once that I treated people like chess pieces. Move them around, use them for strategy, discard them when they're no longer useful. He said I did it to Catherine, did it to him, did it to everyone. I told him he was being dramatic, that I was building something, providing for our family, that he'd understand when he was older. He looked up at me. He was right. I was too arrogant to see it, and by the time I realized what I'd lost, it was too late. One evening, about a month after we met, Richard's phone rang during dinner. We were at a Cuban restaurant he'd discovered. Said their ropa vieja reminded him of something Catherine used to make. His face went grey as he listened, fork suspended halfway to his mouth. He hung up without saying goodbye. The clatter of the restaurant, voices, clinking dishes, salsa music from the speakers, seemed suddenly too loud. I need to go back to Virginia, he said quietly. The cancer is moving faster than they thought. They want me in treatment immediately. My stomach dropped. In 4 weeks, this strange, kind man had become my anchor, the only person in this country who saw me as human instead of burden. What about, you'll come with me, if you want to? He pushed his plate away, food untouched as usual. I'd noticed he ate less every day, as if his body was already preparing to let go. I have a proposition. It's going to sound insane, but hear me out. I waited, heart hammering against my ribs. The restaurant felt too warm suddenly, air thick with cumin and garlic. Marry me. The words hit like a slap. I must have looked shocked because he raised his hands quickly. Not like that. A legal arrangement. You'd have status, security, access to healthcare. When I die, which won't be long, you'd inherit everything. The house, the accounts, all of it. I couldn't speak. My brain couldn't process what he was suggesting. I have no one to leave it to, he continued. My son made it clear he doesn't want anything from me. My wife's family still hates me. I've been trying to figure out what to do with it all. And then I met you. Richard, that's... I struggled for words. That's too much. It's not enough. Not for what your children did, not for what life did, but it's something. He leaned forward, urgent now. You saved me too, Maria. These last few weeks, having someone to help, having a purpose, it gave me something to wake up for. Let me do this, please. I thought about saying no, about thanking him and walking away with my dignity intact. But dignity had abandoned me at the airport a month ago, and this wasn't about pride, it was about survival. It was about a man trying to do one good thing before he died, and a woman tired of being discarded. Okay, I whispered. Okay. His relief was visible. Thank you. We flew to Virginia 2 days later. His house was beautiful, old colonial style, surrounded by oak trees, far too big for one person. He showed me to the guest room first, making it clear I had my own space. The next week we went to a courthouse. A judge married us in 10 minutes. Richard's lawyer served as witness. There was no celebration, no honeymoon. He started chemotherapy the following Monday. I became his caretaker without us discussing it. I drove him to appointments, managed his medications, cooked meals he could barely eat. We watched old movies together in the evenings, his body shrinking into the leather recliner that used to fit him perfectly. Some days he was lucid and talkative. Other days the pain and drugs dragged him under. 3 months after our courthouse wedding, Richard called me into his office. The room smelled like old paper and wood polish. He looked terrible, skin yellow like old parchment, eyes sunken so deep they cast shadows. But his mind was sharp, cutting through the fog of medication with startling clarity. "I need you to understand something," he said, pushing a folder across the desk with trembling hands. "Everything is in order. The will, the accounts, the properties. My lawyer has copies. When I'm gone, it's all yours. But you need to know, my son will fight it." I'd never met Thomas. Richard rarely mentioned him beyond vague references to their estrangement. I'd seen photos around the house, a boy on a bicycle, a teenager in a graduation gown, a young man shaking Richard's hand at some corporate event. In every picture, there was distance between them even when they stood close. Why would he fight if he said he didn't want anything? Because people change their minds when money is involved. He'll say, "You manipulated me, took advantage of a dying man, that you're a gold digger who saw an opportunity." Richard coughed, harsh and wet, reaching for the water glass I kept filled. "He'll probably be half convinced it's true. It'll be easier than admitting his father had a relationship he wasn't part of." I nodded, throat tight with emotions I couldn't name. "Will you tell him the truth?" "What truth?" "That I married a woman I met in an airport, that we barely know each other in the traditional sense, that I'm giving you everything because you were kind to me when I was dying." He smiled, but there was no humor in it. "That sounds exactly like manipulation to anyone who doesn't know what loneliness feels like. What it's like to be invisible, even when you're standing right in front of someone. So what do? You stand your ground. You don't apologize for accepting help. You don't shrink yourself to make him comfortable." He looked at me hard. "Promise me something, Maria. When people try to make you feel guilty for surviving, for accepting kindness, don't let them. You've spent enough of your life apologizing for taking up space." 2 weeks later, Richard died at home. It was 3 in the morning, that dead hour when the world holds its breath. I was sleeping in the chair beside his bed, had been for days, because he'd been afraid to be alone. The hospice nurse had said it would be soon, maybe hours. She was right. He woke me with a hand on my arm, grip surprisingly strong for someone so close to leaving. "Catherine," he whispered, voice like rustling paper. I almost corrected him, then didn't. What did it matter? He was seeing who he needed to see. "I'm here," I said softly, taking his hand. He smiled, eyes unfocused, seeing something or someone I couldn't. "I'm sorry I worked so much. I'm sorry I wasn't there when you needed me. I'm sorry I chose everything else over you." "I forgive you," I told him, meaning it for Catherine, for Thomas, for everyone Richard had hurt in his drive to build something permanent out of something temporary. "Thank you," he breathed. "Thank you for not giving up on me." "I never could," I whispered, and his smile widened. "Good, that's good." He closed his eyes like he was just resting. His breathing slowed, then stopped. The silence that followed was absolute. I sat there holding his hand until it grew cold, until the first grey light of dawn crept through the window. Then I called the hospice nurse. The funeral was small. Richard's lawyer attended, along with a handful of business associates who looked uncomfortable in their grief, like men who'd forgotten how to feel anything that didn't come with a profit margin. There were maybe 20 people scattered through the church pews. The pastor read from notes Richard had left, impersonal words about a man he'd never really known. Thomas came but didn't speak to me. He was 50, tall like his father, with the same pale blue eyes but none of the warmth. He wore an expensive suit and an expression carved from stone. He stared at me across the grave like I was an intruder, a thief, a problem that needed solving, which I suppose I was from his perspective. After the service, his lawyer approached mine, a woman named Rebecca, who Richard had hired specifically for me. "We'll be contesting the will," Thomas's lawyer said, as if announcing the weather. Rebecca didn't flinch. "On what grounds?" "Mental incapacity, undue influence. Take your pick." I watched this exchange from a distance, standing beside Richard's grave. Someone had already started filling it in. The sound of dirt hitting the casket was final and terrible. I'd expected the challenge, but hearing the words still hurt. For 2 months I lived in limbo, while lawyers fought over whether my marriage had been real enough to count. I stayed in that big empty house, learning what silence really sounded like. The refrigerator's hum, the clock in the hallway ticking, my own footsteps on hardwood, the absence of another person breathing, existing, mattering. I planted flowers in the garden Catherine had abandoned, roses, lavender, herbs that smelled like the gardens of my childhood. I dug in the dirt until my hands ached, pulling weeds, turning soil, making something beautiful out of what had been neglected. The physical work helped, gave me purpose when the walls felt like they were closing in. I organized Richard's office, boxing up decades of paperwork. Found photos of Thomas as a child, Richard holding him, both of them laughing. Whatever had broken between them had happened slowly, imperceptibly, until one day they looked up and realized they were strangers. I wondered if my children ever looked at old photos and felt that same ache. The settlement came faster than expected. Thomas didn't have grounds to contest. Richard had been mentally sound, the marriage legal, the will clear. But I didn't want to fight. Through my lawyer, I offered Thomas half. "Tell him it's not about the money," I said. "Tell him his father loved him. That's what Richard would have wanted him to know." My lawyer looked at me like I was crazy. "You're giving away $20 million. I'm keeping what I need and giving him what his father couldn't. A peace offering." Thomas took the settlement. He also took most of his father's business assets. I kept the house, enough money to live comfortably, and Catherine's garden. It felt right, fair, like closing a circle Richard had left open. 6 months after Richard's death, my phone rang. I almost didn't answer, unknown number, but something made me pick up. "Mom?" My daughter's voice. I hadn't heard it since the airport. My hand shook so badly I nearly dropped the phone. "Carla." "Mom, we heard about your husband, about the inheritance." Of course they had. Money has a way of traveling faster than apologies. "We want to come visit, to see you. We made a terrible mistake, and we want to make things right." I could have said yes, could have let them back in, pretended forgiveness was that simple. The old Maria would have. But Richard had given me more than money. He'd given me time to remember who I was before I became someone's doormat. "Why now?" I asked quietly. Silence on the other end. Then, "We were wrong, Mom. We were stressed, and we handled it badly, but we love you. We want you in our lives. You left me in an airport," I said. "You took my documents, my money, and you walked away. You wanted me to suffer." "It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that." My voice stayed steady. "And now I have money, so suddenly I'm worth visiting again. That's not fair." "You're right, it's not fair. None of this is fair, but here's what's true. I loved you more than anything. I gave you everything I had, years of my life, my health, every dollar I earned. I missed your childhoods because I was working to give you better ones. And you threw me away when I became inconvenient. That's not something money fixes. That's not something a phone call erases." "So what?" Carla's voice turned cold, defensive. "You're just going to cut us off? We're your children. And you treated me like garbage, like something you could throw away when you were done with it." My hand clenched around the phone. "Love isn't obligation, Carla. It's respect. And you lost mine at that airport when you walked away from me. You know what? Miguel said you'd be like this. Said the money would change you, make you bitter and vengeful. The money didn't change me. You did, when you left me alone and scared in a foreign country, when you decided I wasn't worth the trouble of existing. I hung up. My hands were shaking so badly, the phone nearly slipped from my grip. But my heart felt lighter than it had in years, like I'd set down a weight I'd been carrying so long I'd forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight. They called back. Carla, then my son Miguel. Text messages appeared one after another, notifications lighting up my phone like accusations. Mom, we need to talk. You're being unreasonable. We're your family. How can you do this to us? Then emails. Long, rambling messages that started with apologies and ended with demands. They were sorry, they said. They'd made mistakes, but I owed them. Family forgives. Family doesn't abandon family. The irony of that statement apparently lost on them. All saying the same thing in different words. We're sorry, we need you, family is forever. But none of them said, we were wrong. We hurt you. We understand why you can't trust us. We'll spend the rest of our lives proving we've changed. They wanted forgiveness without accountability, love without change. They wanted me to pretend the airport never happened, to accept their reappearance as if they'd just been busy instead of cruel. I blocked their numbers eventually. It hurt less than I expected, like removing a splinter that had been infected for so long you'd forgotten what it felt like not to ache. A year after Richard's death, I sold the Virginia house. It had served its purpose, given me shelter, time to heal, space to remember who I was. But it was Richard's home, not mine. His memories filled every room, and I needed to build my own. I moved to a small town in North Carolina, near the mountains where the air smelled like pine and rain. Bought a cottage with a view of rolling hills, adopted 2 cats from the shelter, orange tabbies who'd been there too long because they weren't kittens anymore. I named them Richard and Catherine. It felt right. I started volunteering at an immigrant community center downtown in a building that used to be a church. The basement smelled like coffee and photocopies and hope. I taught English to newcomers who reminded me of myself, scared, determined, trying to build lives in a language that didn't feel like home yet. I helped with paperwork, navigating the bureaucracy that seemed designed to confuse and exhaust. I translated at appointments, doctor's offices, social services, court hearings. I became the person I'd needed at that airport, the person Richard had been for me. There was a woman from Guatemala, Rosa, who came to classes with her 3 children. She worked 2 jobs and still could barely afford rent. I watched her fall asleep during lessons, exhausted beyond measure, and saw myself 20 years ago. I started helping her, not with money, though I paid for her kids' school supplies, but with time. Watching the children so she could sleep, helping her negotiate with her landlord who was trying to evict her, teaching her how the system worked, which battles to fight and which to walk away from. "Why do you do this?" she asked me once, folding donated clothes at the center. "You don't have to. You have money. You could be anywhere." "Because someone did it for me when I had nothing," I said. "And because having money doesn't mean much if you're alone with it." Sometimes I think about my children, not often, but sometimes. Usually late at night when the house is quiet and the cats are sleeping and I'm left with just my thoughts and the sound of wind in the pines. I wonder if they tell people about their awful mother who chose money over family. I wonder if they've rewritten history in their heads, made themselves the victims of my cruelty instead of the architects of their own. I wonder if they ever understood that it wasn't about the money. It was about being seen as human, about mattering, about drawing a line between love and abuse and refusing to pretend there's no difference. I don't hate them. Hate takes energy I'd rather spend elsewhere. It's a fire that consumes the person holding it, leaves nothing but ash and bitterness. But I don't forgive them either, not in the way they want. Not the forgiveness that says, "It's okay, come back, let's pretend it never happened." Forgiveness without change is just permission to hurt you again. Richard taught me that, though he never said it out loud. He lived it in his regret about Thomas, in his understanding that some bridges can't be rebuilt with good intentions alone. He taught me that it's never too late to choose yourself, that kindness doesn't mean being a doormat, that you can love people and still walk away when they treat you like you're worthless. On hard days, I sit in my garden and remember him. The way he looked at me in that airport like I mattered. The way he gave me not just money, but time. Time to heal, to think, to become someone who knew her own worth. I'm 62 now. My Spanish is rusty, but my English is better. I have friends here, other women with stories like mine, survival etched into their smiles. We drink coffee together, share meals, laugh about the things we've survived. I'm not rich by American standards, but I have enough. Enough for a roof, food, small joys. Enough to help others the way Richard helped me. Enough to sleep at night knowing I didn't betray myself for the comfort of people who never valued me. Sometimes tourists ask me for directions in broken Spanish, and I help them in English. Sometimes they look surprised. How does this small Mexican woman speak so well? I don't explain. I just point them where they need to go and watch them walk away, grateful. Just like Richard watched me walk towards something better, even though he wouldn't be there to see it. I think about him every day, not with sadness, but with gratitude. He was a stranger who became my savior, not because he gave me money, but because he reminded me I deserved to be treated like a human being, that I wasn't the problem, they were, that being alone is better than being surrounded by people who wish you were invisible. This is what I want people to know. You are not obligated to accept cruelty from family. You are not selfish for wanting respect. You are not wrong for walking away from people who hurt you, even if they share your blood. Love is action, not obligation. And sometimes the greatest love is the boundary that says, not anymore. If this story touched something in you, I hope you'll share it. Not for me, but for someone else who needs to hear it. Someone standing in their own airport, wondering if they'll survive what comes next. Someone who thinks they deserve the pain because family is supposed to be forever. Tell them it's okay to choose themselves. Tell them there are Richard Grants in the world, people who see you when you're invisible, who help without expecting ownership of your gratitude. Tell them it's never too late to start over. And if you found something valuable here, subscribe to Every Smile Hides a Story. These stories matter. Your story matters. We're building something here, a space where the complicated, messy truth of being human gets told without judgment. Where we remember that everyone is fighting battles we know nothing about. Where we choose empathy over assumption, understanding over condemnation. Some stories don't have fairy tale endings. Some stories end with you, alone but whole, in a garden you planted yourself. And that's not tragic, that's triumph, that's survival becoming a choice instead of a sentence. That's knowing your worth and refusing to negotiate it down to make others comfortable. I'm here in my cottage with my cats and my flowers and my peace. My children are somewhere else, probably telling their version where I'm the villain. That's okay. I don't need them to understand. I don't need their version of events to match mine. I just need to wake up each morning and recognize the woman in the mirror, strong, scarred, and finally free.